What you are about to hear is a story that unfolds in the sterile, anonymous chaos of an international airport, but it's a drama that could happen anywhere. It's a story about a moment of shocking cruelty where a gate agent armed with a little bit of power and a heart full of venom commits an act of irreversible damage against a 7-year-old child. But it's also the story of what happens next. It's about the moment the plane door opens and a woman steps out. A woman they believed was just another passenger, but who was in fact a force of nature they were utterly unprepared for. This isn't just a story of karma. It's a testament to the fact that you never ever know who you're dealing with. The air in Dulles International Airport's Concourse C was thick with the usual cocktail of hurried anxiety and stale Cinnabon. 7-year-old Owen clutching his worn plush giraffe, Bartholomew pressed his nose against the vast window, his breath fogging a small circle on the glass. Below the tarmac was a meticulously choreographed ballet of baggage carts, fuel trucks, and hulking aircraft. His flight, Transatlantic Air Flight 117 to Geneva, was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, and to him it looked like a great white bird ready to leap into the sky. "Is Mommy going to be right there when we land? Auntie Anya?" he asked, his voice small but vibrating with the pure, uncut excitement only a child can muster. Dr. Anya Sharma knelt adjusting the lapels on his small blazer. "She will be the very first person you see, little man. I promise." Anya was the picture of effortless elegance, even in the maelstrom of international travel. Her tailored trousers and silk blouse spoke of a woman accustomed to moving between worlds, which she did. As a senior diplomat for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees UNHCR, her life was a series of concourses like this one, a string of cities from Geneva to Nairobi, Bogota to Amman. But today, she wasn't a diplomat. She was Auntie Anya, entrusted with the most precious cargo in her world, her sister's son. Owen was flying as an unaccompanied minor for the first time. His mother, Chloe, a renowned pediatric surgeon with Doctors Without Borders, had been stationed in a refugee camp on the Syrian-Turkish border for the past 6 months. Now reassigned to a desk job in Geneva for a year, she was finally able to have her son with her. The reunion was a beacon that had pulled their small family through a long, difficult separation. Anya held his official documents in a crisp folio, his brand-new American passport, the signed and notarized consent forms, his Swiss visa, and the unaccompanied minor paperwork all meticulously organized. She had triple-checked everything. In her line of work, documentation was sacred. It was the thin paper shield that stood between a person and statelessness, between safety and peril. "Okay, Owen," she said, her voice warm and reassuring. "We're going to go to the desk now. Remember what we practiced. You show the nice lady your ticket and your passport, and you tell her you're ready for a big adventure." Owen nodded bravely, his grip on Bartholomew tightening. "A big adventure," he repeated. They approached the boarding gate C-28. The area was a controlled chaos of passengers repacking carry-ons, chugging last-minute water bottles, and making final loud phone calls. At the podium stood the gate agent. Her name tag read Karen Miller. Karen was a woman who looked like she was perpetually chewing on a wasp. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, tight bun that seemed to pull at the corners of her eyes, giving her a look of permanent disapproval. She was in her late 40s, her face a roadmap of minor grievances and unspoken resentments. Today was a particularly bad day. She'd been passed over for a supervisor position for the 3rd time. Her car had a flat tire that morning, and a passenger on the previous flight had yelled at her for 5 minutes about the lack of gluten-free pretzels. She was a tinderbox waiting for a spark. When Anya and Owen reached the desk, Karen didn't look up from her screen. She simply extended a hand, palm up, a silent, imperious demand for their documents. "Good morning," Anya said, her voice pleasant but firm. "I'm checking in my nephew, Owen Williams. He's flying as an unaccompanied minor to Geneva." Karen finally lifted her eyes. They flickered from Anya's face to Owen's, and a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred in her demeanor. It was a tightening, a sharpening of her already sour expression. "Documents," she snapped, her voice flat. Anya slid the passport and boarding pass across the counter. Karen picked up the passport, a dark blue booklet with the proud eagle of the United States on the front. She flipped it open with a practiced, almost contemptuous flick of her thumb. Her eyes scanned the photo page. Owen, with his bright eyes and wide, toothy grin, stared back. "Owen Williams." Karen muttered, her gaze lingering on the photo, then flicking back to the boy in front of her. She looked at Anya, then back at Owen. "And you are?" she asked Anya, her tone dripping with suspicion. "I'm his Aunt Anya Sharma, his legal guardian for the purposes of this travel. All the relevant forms are right here," Anya said, gesturing to the folio. "His mother, Dr. Chloe Williams, is the receiving party in Geneva. Her details are all on file." Karen ignored the folio. She continued to scrutinize the passport, turning the pages slowly one by one. She held it up to the light, angling it as if searching for some hidden flaw. It was a level of inspection that went beyond standard procedure. It was a performance of power. "Is there a problem?" Anya asked, a faint edge creeping into her voice. "I need to be thorough," Karen replied, not making eye contact. "Especially with unaccompanied minors. And with mismatched guardianship." The implication hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Anya, a woman of South Asian descent, and Owen, a black child. The racist insinuation was as clear as if she'd shouted it. Anya felt a familiar hot flash of anger, but she suppressed it. For Owen's sake, she needed this to be smooth. "My sister and I have different fathers," Anya stated calmly, offering an explanation that was none of Karen's business. "The notarized letter of consent, which you have in his file, clearly states my name and my relationship to the child. It's accompanied by a copy of my passport and my sister's." Karen grunted a non-committal sound. She continued her slow, deliberate page-turning of Owen's passport. She seemed to be taking an almost perverse pleasure in the delay in the power she wielded over their journey. Then she stopped. Her finger landed on one of the visa pages near the back. "What is this?" she asked, her voice rising with a note of triumphant accusation. Anya leaned forward. On the page, almost hidden in the corner, was a tiny, exquisitely drawn rocket ship, no bigger than a thumbnail done in blue ballpoint pen. Next to it, in a child's shaky hand, were the letters LW. Owen's face lit up. "I did that. It's my spaceship, so my passport can fly to the moon." Anya's heart softened for a second, before a knot of dread formed in her stomach. She remembered Owen showing it to her proudly a week ago. It was a tiny, innocent act of a child personalizing his most important new possession. Karen's face, however, had turned to stone. "You drew in a federal document," she said, her eyes boring into Owen. The 7-year-old shrank back behind Anya's leg, his excitement instantly extinguished, replaced by fear. "Ma'am, he's a child," Anya said, her voice low and steady, trying to de-escalate. "It's a tiny doodle on a blank visa page. It doesn't obscure any official stamps or information. It's harmless." "Harmless?" Karen scoffed, her voice now loud enough to draw the attention of nearby passengers. "This is defacement of a government document. It's a federal offense. This passport is invalid." The word invalid struck Anya like a physical blow. "That is a gross overreaction. I am a diplomat. I work with passports and international travel documents for a living. A minor mark like that on a non-essential page does not invalidate a passport. At worst, a customs agent might give a stern look. It does not prevent travel. You're a diplomat, Karen said, looking Anya up and down with a dismissive sneer. Sure you are. And I'm the Queen of England. This passport is compromised. The airline cannot accept it. We would be liable. The final boarding call for Flight 117 echoed through the concourse. A knot of anxiety tightened in Anya's chest. This couldn't be happening. Please call your supervisor. Anya demanded, her diplomatic calm beginning to fray. We are not going to miss this flight over a child's doodle. I don't need a supervisor to tell me what the regulations are. Karen shot back her authority, puffing up her chest. I am the final word at this gate. Another gate agent, a younger man named Mark, glanced over, a worried look on his face. Karen, maybe you should just mind your own station, Mark, she snapped, cutting him off. Anya knew she was running out of time. The plane wouldn't wait. She made a split-second calculation. She had to get Owen on that plane. She could sort this out from the other side. She had a diplomatic passport herself. She could handle any issues in Geneva. Fine, Anya said, changing tactics. Let's say you're right. It's a risk. A risk I am willing to take. Let him board. I will sign a waiver, a document, assuming all liability if Swiss immigration has an issue, which they won't. My sister is waiting for him. This reunion has been 6 months in the making. Please. She was pleading now, and she hated it. She hated the position this woman had put her in. She could see Owen's eyes welling up with tears, his lower lip trembling. Karen seemed to savor her desperation. She looked from Anya's face to Owen's tear-streaked cheeks, and a cruel, thin smile touched her lips. No, the decision is final. He's not flying. Not with this. And then she did something that fractured the reality of the moment, something that took the situation from a bureaucratic nightmare to an act of pure, unadulterated malice. With a swift, deliberate motion, Karen Miller gripped the photo page of Owen's passport. What are you doing? Anya gasped. Her eyes wide with disbelief. Before anyone could react, Karen ripped the page. The sound was sickeningly loud in the relative hush of the gate area. The sound of tearing fabric, of something vital being destroyed. She wasn't done. She tore out another page, then another. The visa page with the little rocket ship. The blank pages next to it. She tore them into pieces, the small blue and red fragments fluttering onto the counter like malevolent confetti. She held up the mangled, pathetic remains of the booklet. Now it's definitely invalid, she said, her voice laced with a triumphant venom. No one is flying anywhere. A collective gasp went through the small crowd of onlookers. Owen let out a choked, terrified sob. Anya stared frozen for a heartbeat at the shredded pieces of her nephew's future, of his reunion lying on the cold, laminate countertop. The calm, the control, the diplomat. It all vanished, burned away by a surge of pure, protective fury. At that exact moment, the final boarding call blared over the PA. Anya's name was called out specifically. Passenger Anya Sharma, please board immediately. The doors are closing. Karen smirked. Looks like you have a plane to catch, or forfeit your first-class seat. It was the ultimate checkmate. For a split second, Anya was paralyzed. Her flight, her job, her responsibility. But then she looked down at Owen, who was now weeping uncontrollably, his small body shaking. He was looking at the pieces of his passport, his dream of seeing his mother torn to shreds in front of him. Without a word, Anya turned and walked down the jet bridge. Her movements were stiff, robotic. Karen watched her go, a look of smug victory on her face. She had won. She had put the diplomat in her place. She had protected the sanctity of her gate. She turned to a stunned Mark. Start processing the standby list. We have an open seat in first and a no-show in coach." She failed to notice the passenger who had been standing behind Anya, a businessman who had filmed the entire horrifying interaction on his phone. On the plane, Anya found her seat 1A. She slid into the plush leather, her mind a screaming void. The flight attendant came by. "Ms. Sharma, welcome aboard. Can I get you a pre-departure beverage, champagne?" Anya looked at the flight attendant, but her eyes were seeing right through her. She saw Owen's face. She saw the torn paper, the malicious smile of the gate agent, the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, the articles of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, the airline's own contract of carriage, international aviation law. It all swirled in her head not as a panicked mess, but as a series of cold, hard, interlocking facts. The aircraft door swung shut with a heavy pneumatic hiss. The engines began to whine, spooling up for departure. Anya unbuckled her seatbelt. "Ma'am," the flight attendant asked, alarmed, "you need to remain seated." Anya stood up. She was no longer Auntie Anya, the flustered guardian. She was Dr. Anya Sharma, and a line had been crossed. A line that didn't just involve her family, but her entire life's work. "Open that door," she said, her voice quiet, but with a core of steel that made the flight attendant freeze. "I can't do that, ma'am. We're about to push back." Anya turned and walked to the cockpit door, rapping sharply. The co-pilot opened it, a questioning look on his face. "This aircraft will not be departing." Anya stated not as a request, but as a fact. "There has been a grave incident at your boarding gate involving the illegal destruction of a travel document and the potential violation of international law. I am a UN diplomat, and I am formally requesting you return this aircraft to the gate, immediately." The pilot's eyes widened. Of all the things he had expected to deal with today, this was not one of them. The words UN diplomat and international law had an immediate sobering effect. Back at the gate, Karen Miller was feeling pleased with herself. She had cleared the standby list and was about to close out the flight. Owen was huddled on a chair, being watched over by the other agent Mark, who looked sick to his stomach. Anya's sister Chloe had been called in Geneva and was now a frantic, hysterical voice on the phone that Mark was trying to calm. Then a crackle came over the radio. It was the flight's captain. "Gate C-28. This is Captain Evans of Flight 117. We are returning to the gate. I repeat, we are returning to the gate. Have a supervisor meet us on the jet bridge, immediately." Karen stared at the radio in disbelief. That was impossible. Planes didn't just come back. But the massive Dreamliner, which had just begun to push back, halted. Its engines spooled down. The jet bridge, which had started to retract, slowly began moving back towards the aircraft door. Karen felt the first cold tendril of fear creep up her spine. What was going on? The door of the jet bridge connected with a solid thud. A few seconds later, the aircraft door opened. And Dr. Anya Sharma stepped off the plane. The look on her face was not one of anger. It was something far more terrifying. It was the calm, focused intensity of a storm about to break. She walked down the jet bridge, her heels clicking with sharp, deliberate authority. When she emerged back into the gate area, every eye was on her. The smug look had been wiped clean from Karen Miller's face, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed confusion. Anya walked past her directly to Owen. She knelt and wrapped him in her arms. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, her voice once again soft and maternal. "Auntie is here. Auntie is going to fix this." Then she stood up and turned to face Karen Miller. "You have no idea what you've just done," Anya said, her voice level and dangerously quiet. The real drama was just beginning. The gate area at C-28 had become a theater of silent, gaping disbelief. The few remaining passengers, the other airline staff, and even the cleaners paused their duties, drawn into the magnetic field of the confrontation. The air crackled. Karen Miller, for her part, was struggling to reboot her understanding of the situation. A passenger getting off a plane after the doors had closed was a breach of protocol, a security issue. It was her territory. She tried to reassert her shattered authority. "Ma'am, you cannot be here," Karen said, forcing a sternness into her voice that wavered precariously. "You have breached a secure area after boarding. I'm going to have to call security." Anya gave a small, humorless smile. "Please do. In fact, I insist on it. Call airport police. Call your supervisor. Call your head of North American operations. Call anyone you think has the authority to handle what's about to happen here. Because you, Ms. Miller, are catastrophically out of your depth." Anya's every word was precise, clipped and devoid of the pleading panic she had shown minutes before. She had picked up her folio from the counter, a silent act of reclaiming her power. "I have already informed the captain of this aircraft of the situation," Anya continued, her voice resonating in the hushed space. "I have identified myself to him, and he has quite correctly understood the gravity of an airline employee willfully and illegally destroying a passport issued by the United States government, especially a passport belonging to a minor child." She took a step closer to the podium, her eyes locking onto Karen's. "You didn't just inconvenience a passenger, Ms. Miller. You committed a flagrantly illegal act. You have, in effect, stranded a 7-year-old American citizen and prevented him from uniting with his legal guardian. Given that he is a black child and you have made your assessment of his guardianship clear, one could even argue this borders on an act of targeted harassment and unlawful detainment." These are very, very serious words, and I choose them very, very carefully. Karen's face had gone from pale to a mottled, sickly white. The word illegal was one thing. The phrases unlawful detainment and targeted harassment were from another universe entirely. This was no longer about a defaced document. Just then, a harried-looking man in a slightly better-fitting suit rushed toward the gate. His name tag read, "David Chen, Supervisor." "What is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes darting between Anya, a crying Owen being comforted by the other gate agent, and Karen, who looked like a cornered animal. Captain Evans radioed that a passenger deplaned and claimed an incident. Anya turned to him. "Are you the supervisor in charge?" "Yes, I am." "David Chen." Anya began, her tone shifting to one of official diplomatic protocol. "My name is Dr. Anya Sharma. I am a senior diplomat with the United Nations. This is my nephew, Owen Williams, a U.S. citizen. We were scheduled to travel on your Flight 117 to Geneva. Your employee, Ms. Karen Miller, denied him boarding based on a minuscule pen mark in his passport. When I challenged this absurd interpretation of regulations, she proceeded to deliberately destroy his passport." She gestured to the torn scraps of paper still on the counter. David Chen's eyes fell upon them, and all the color drained from his face. He had seen a lot in his 15 years with the airline, but this was a first. It was a level of transgression that was almost unthinkable. She tore it," he stammered, looking at Karen. It was defaced." Karen blurted out, her voice a high-pitched squeak. "It was invalid. I was following procedure to confiscate a compromised document." "Confiscate!" Anya's voice was laced with ice. There is no procedure in any airline manual or any federal regulation that gives a gate agent the authority to destroy a citizen's passport. You confiscate a fraudulent ticket. You do not destroy a sovereign nation's property, and you certainly do not do it in front of the child to whom it belongs. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Mr. Chen, this is what is going to happen now. First, you are going to find a secure, quiet room for my nephew and me. He has been subjected to enough trauma and public humiliation. Second, you are going to get your airline's chief legal counsel on the phone. Not a junior associate. The head lawyer. Third, you are going to contact the airport's Port Authority Police as Ms. Miller so helpfully suggested. I wish to file a formal police report regarding the destruction of property and potential civil rights violations. David Chen was sweating now. The phrase UN diplomat had set off every alarm bell in his head. Her calm, systematic list of demands confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't an irate customer he could placate with a voucher. This was a full-blown crisis. Of course, Dr. Sharma. Right away, he said, fumbling for his radio. Karen, stay right here. Don't move. Don't say anything. He turned to the other agent. Mark, escort Dr. Sharma and the child to the first-class lounge. Get them anything they want. Water, juice, food. Anything. Anya nodded, scooped up a still sniffling Owen, and followed Mark away from the scene. As she left, she glanced back at Karen Miller. The woman was standing alone behind the podium, her face a mask of crumbling defiance and dawning horror. She was beginning to understand that the ground beneath her feet was not just shaking, it was giving way entirely. The businessman who had filmed the incident quietly approached David Chen. "Excuse me," he said, holding up his phone. "I think you and your legal counsel are going to want to see this. I have the entire thing on video. If David Chen's face could have gotten any whiter, it would have become translucent." He numbly took the man's contact information, his hand trembling slightly. In the serene, hushed atmosphere of the Polaris Lounge, the chaos of the concourse felt a world away. Owen was curled up on a plush sofa, sipping an apple juice, and watching cartoons on Anya's tablet. The immediate terror had subsided, replaced by a child's weary sadness. Bartholomew the giraffe lay beside him. Anya was on the phone. But she wasn't calling her sister again. Chloe was already beside herself with a mix of fury and anguish in Geneva, and Anya had promised to handle it. No, Anya was making a different set of calls. Her first was to a very private, very secure number in Washington, D.C. "Jessica, it's Anya." Jessica Davies was one of the sharpest civil rights litigators in the country. She was also Anya's former law school roommate and one of her closest friends. "Anya, what's wrong? You sound precise. That's your danger voice." Anya quickly recounted the entire incident, from the microaggressions to the torn passport. She omitted no detail, her memory for dialogue, and sequence honed by years of diplomatic negotiations and witness debriefings. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Jess, you there?" "Oh, I'm here," Jessica's voice replied, and it was now imbued with the predatory glee of a shark that has just scented blood in the water. "Oh my God, Anya. They did what to Owen? That airline, that woman, they have no idea who they just messed with. They just handed us a multi-million-dollar lawsuit on a silver platter. Punitive damages are going to be biblical. I don't want this to be just about money, Jess," Anya said firmly. "I want accountability. I want policy change. I want this to be the last time any employee of that airline ever feels empowered to treat a person of color, a child, any passenger like that. I want them to build an entirely new anti-bias training protocol, and I want to be in the room when they design it." "Anya." "We'll get all of that," Jessica said. "We will own them. First things first. The video. The witness. Get his details. That's our smoking gun. Second, the police report. Emphasize the destruction of federal property. That elevates it beyond a customer service complaint. Third, do not accept any apology or offer from the airline without me present. They will try to make this go away quietly. We are not going to let them. Anya felt a grim sense of purpose solidifying within her. I know. Thanks, Jess. I'll keep you posted. Her next call was to the U.S. State Department's Passport Services Agency to report the destruction and start the process for an emergency replacement. Her status as a diplomat and the extreme circumstances would cut through the usual red tape. By the time David Chen appeared at the lounge door, flanked by 2 Port Authority police officers, Anya was ready. She had built her fortress and sharpened her swords. Dr. Sharma Officer Rodriguez, the senior of the 2, said respectfully, "We've been apprised of the situation. We'd like to take your statement." Anya nodded. "Of course, officer. But first, I'd like to know what immediate action Transatlantic Air is taking regarding their employee." David Chen cleared his throat, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Ms. Miller has been suspended pending a full investigation. She has been escorted from the airport. Suspended." Anya raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Chen, your employee didn't just break a rule. She broke the law. She destroyed a document that is the property of the U.S. government. I expect a full and transparent investigation, and I expect its findings to be shared with my legal counsel." She handed him Jessica Davies's business card, which she kept in her wallet for emergencies. "My lawyer will be in touch with your legal department within the hour. In the meantime, my nephew requires an emergency passport. The State Department is expediting it, but they require a formal report from the airline detailing the destruction of the original by your employee. I will need a copy of that report." Chen just nodded numbly, accepting the card. He felt like a man in a rowboat being given instructions by the captain of a battleship. As Anya gave her calm, detailed statement to the police, the video taken by the businessman was already beginning its insidious journey. He had sent it to his wife, who, outraged, had posted it to her Twitter feed with the caption, "Unbelievable." At Transatlantic Air gate agent at Dulles rips up a little boy's passport right in front of him and his aunt, just because he drew a tiny rocket ship in it. This is child abuse. Flying, while black. She wasn't a major influencer. She had perhaps 800 followers. But the video was dynamite. The raw cruelty of the act, the sound of the tearing paper, Owen's heartbroken sobs, it was visceral, undeniable, and deeply shocking. Within an hour, it had 1,000 retweets. By the time Anya and Owen were being chauffeured to a nearby hotel paid for by the airline, it had 10,000. By the time they were checking into their suite, the story had been picked up by a local news blogger. The name Karen Miller had not yet been mentioned. But the internet, in its relentless hive-mind way, was already starting to ask, who was she? The first twist of the knife of karma had just been pushed in, and it was about to get much, much deeper. The viral firestorm ignited by a single tweet was faster and more ferocious than anyone at Transatlantic Air could have possibly imagined. By evening, the hashtag #JusticeForOwen was trending nationwide. The video was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. It was being dissected on cable news with aviation experts and civil rights advocates expressing uniform shock and disgust. The anonymity of Karen Miller was short-lived. A former high school classmate recognized her. A disgruntled neighbor confirmed it. Someone found her public-facing Facebook profile with its mix of inspirational quotes and thinly veiled political grievances. By morning, her name, her photo, and her place of employment were inextricably linked to the viral video of her cruelty. For Karen Miller, the world had collapsed overnight. She woke up to her phone buzzing with hundreds of notifications, Angry messages, friend requests from strangers, and texts from horrified family members. Her Facebook wall was a battlefield of condemnation. Her personal information, including her home address and phone number, had been posted on a dark corner of Reddit and was now spreading. She was a prisoner in her own home, the blinds drawn, flinching at every car that passed by. The smug satisfaction she had felt at the gate had curdled into a cold, terrifying dread. It wasn't just the airline's suspension. This was a public crucifixion. Every news report felt like a nail being hammered in. They painted her as a monster, a racist, a Karen of cartoonish proportions. And the worst part was, as she replayed the events in her mind, stripped of her self-righteous anger, she could see it. She saw her sneer. She heard the venom in her voice. She saw the terror in a little boy's eyes. She had done this. Meanwhile, at the Transatlantic Air corporate headquarters in Chicago, it was all hands-on-deck panic. The stock was down 4% in pre-market trading. The CEO, a stoic silver-haired man named Richard Thompson, had been on a conference call since 5 a.m. with the board and the heads of PR and legal. "This is a 5-alarm fire," Thompson said, his voice grim. "Our brand is being associated with child abuse and racism. How did this happen? How was this woman employed by us?" The head of HR, a flustered woman named Susan, stammered. "Richard, her file. It's not clean. There have been 3 prior passenger complaints against her in the last 2 years, all informal, all filed by minority passengers. One for being unnecessarily rude, another for making a passenger miss a flight over a baggage dispute. They were all resolved at the supervisor level. No formal disciplinary action was ever taken." A groan went around the virtual room. This was the smoking gun. It wasn't a one-off incident by a bad apple. It was a pattern of behavior that the airline had implicitly tolerated. Jessica Davies, Anya's lawyer, had already discovered this. An anonymous tip, likely from a disgruntled HR employee at the airline, had landed in her inbox that morning, detailing the prior complaints against Karen Miller. It was a gift. It transformed the lawsuit from being about a single incident into a case of systemic negligence and corporate condoned bigotry. Jessica's first official letter to the airline's legal counsel was a masterpiece of legal aggression. It cited the video evidence, the multiple witnesses, the pattern of prior complaints, the psychological trauma to a minor, the violation of federal law regarding passport destruction, and the potential violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It didn't just demand a settlement, it demanded a complete overhaul of the airline's training procedures to be overseen by an independent body chosen by her client. It also floated the idea of a press conference where Dr. Anya Sharma of the United Nations would detail the airline's failings on a global stage. The threat was explicit and terrifying for the airline. Anya wasn't just any victim. Her title carried immense moral weight. A UN diplomat who specialized in the welfare of vulnerable populations being subjected to this by their airline. The optics were catastrophic. CEO Richard Thompson made a decision. "We don't fight this. We capitulate. Completely. We issue a full-throated, unreserved apology. We terminate Miller effective immediately. We announce a full review of all our policies. And you," he said, pointing his pen at his general counsel, "you get on the phone with this Jessica Davies and you give her everything she wants. Money is no object. Make this go away." Back in Washington, Anya was shielding Owen from the storm. They had a new emergency passport in hand, issued in record time. They were staying in the hotel, watching movies, and ordering room service, creating a bubble of safety. Owen, with the resilience of a child, was slowly returning to his cheerful self, though he now clung to Anya a little tighter. He was drawing in his sketchbook mostly pictures of his Auntie Anya as a superhero with a cape made of passports. Anya saw the news, of course. She saw the viral video and read the articles. She felt a grim satisfaction not at Karen's personal ruin, but at the sheer undeniable force of the accountability. But her mission wasn't over. The call from the airline came that afternoon. Not from David Chen, but from Richard Thompson himself. Dr. Sharma. The CEO's voice was grave and humbled. I am calling you to offer my most profound and sincere apology on behalf of every single person at Transatlantic Air. What happened to you and your nephew is inexcusable. It is a betrayal of our values and of basic human decency. There are no words to express how sorry I am. Anya listened, her expression unreadable. Mr. Thompson, I appreciate your call, but apologies are words. I am interested in actions. Of course, Thompson said quickly. We have already terminated the employee in question. We have launched a top-to-bottom review of our sensitivity and anti-bias training. Your lawyer, Ms. Davies, is speaking with our legal team as we speak, and I have instructed them to be fully cooperative in reaching a settlement that is not just fair, but reparative. Reparative, Anya repeated the word. That's a good word, Mr. Thompson. Reparations involve making things right. My nephew is 7 years old. He is a bright, loving, wonderful black child who just learned from your airline that the world can be a cruel and unfair place for no reason at all. How do you repair that? The question hung in the air, a powerful indictment that no amount of money could fully answer. We will do whatever it takes, Dr. Sharma. We are prepared to offer a substantial settlement to be placed in a trust for Owen's education and future. Furthermore, we would like to make a significant donation to a charity of your choice that works with vulnerable children. This was the opening Anya had been waiting for. The charity I have in mind, she said, her voice like steel, is the UNHCR's program for undocumented and stateless children, the ones whose lack of a passport, something your employee treated with such contempt, puts them at risk of trafficking and exploitation every single day. There was a stunned silence from the CEO, and regarding the new training protocol, Anya continued pressing her advantage. I don't want a review. I want a revolution. I will be submitting a proposal drafted by experts in the fields of civil rights and child psychology. It will be mandatory for every single employee, from the baggage handlers to the boardroom, and its implementation will be a non-negotiable part of our settlement. Richard Thompson, one of the most powerful CEOs in the aviation industry, felt utterly and completely outmaneuvered. He had come to offer money and apologies. He was leaving with a commitment to fundamentally change the culture of his company under the direct influence of the woman they had wronged. Yes, Dr. Sharma, he said, his voice quiet. We agree to your terms. The karma for Karen Miller was swift and brutal public shame, financial ruin, professional exile. But the karma for Transatlantic Air was of a different kind. It was not a punishment that would destroy them, but one that would force them to be better. It was a hard, expensive, and deeply public lesson in the cost of looking the other way. Anya hung up the phone. She looked over at Owen, who had fallen asleep on the couch, his sketchbook open on his chest. She walked over and gently picked it up. On the open page was a new drawing. It was him and his mom running towards each other under a bright yellow sun. In the corner, a tiny airplane was flying through a perfect blue sky. There was no rocket ship this time. The adventure was no longer about flying to the moon. It was about flying home. The final negotiations did not take place in a sterile boardroom, but over a series of tense, sterile video calls that spanned 3 days. In her sleek Washington, D.C. office, Jessica Davies sat like a general at her command post, with Anya patched in from her hotel suite. On the other screen, the faces of Transatlantic Air's general counsel and 2 vice presidents were pale and drawn, their usual corporate swagger replaced by a somber deference. They had been stripped of all leverage. The viral video, the witness statements, the damning evidence of prior complaints, Jessica had laid out her case with surgical precision, leaving them no room to maneuver. "The trust for the child is non-negotiable," Jessica stated, her voice calm and final. "The sum we have discussed is not a starting point for negotiation. It is the cost of remediation, as is the donation to the UNHCR. One of the vice presidents cleared his throat. "Ms. Davies, the amount for the donation is substantial. It is more than our entire corporate philanthropy budget for the year." Jessica offered a thin, unforgiving smile. "Then I suggest you consider it a lesson in preventative investment. A fraction of that amount spent on proper training years ago would have saved us all this unpleasantness." There was no reply. They knew she was right. Anya watched the exchange, her own expression unreadable. When the legal jargon subsided and the airline executives had formally capitulated on every point, Jessica ended the call. "We got them, Anya," Jessica said, a rare note of triumph in her voice. "We got everything. More than everything. They're even fast-tracking a new third-party complaint system so another Karen Miller can't be swept under the rug by a mid-level manager." "It was never about the money, Jess," Anya replied quietly, her gaze distant. "You know that." "I know," Jessica softened. "But money is the language a corporation understands. It's their metric for pain. And what you did with the policy changes, that's the real victory. You've forced a behemoth to change its DNA. That, my friend, is how you leverage power." The creation of the Sharma Protocol was an exercise in Anya's quiet, relentless diplomacy. She was on calls with DEI consultants, child psychologists, and airline training managers. She dissected their existing materials, pointing out the coded language, the implicit biases, the missed opportunities for empathy. One executive tried to argue that the proposed changes would cause significant operational delays. Anya's response was swift and cool. "My nephew's reunion with his mother was delayed by 6 months because of your operational failures. We can find a way to add 30 seconds of compassionate consideration to your check-in process. This is not a negotiation." The executive quickly backed down. She insisted that every employee from the CEO down to the contract cleaners undergo the training, ensuring that the culture shift was absolute and not just cosmetic. For Karen Miller, the aftermath was a suffocating silence. The initial storm of digital hatred the reporters camped outside her suburban home, the vitriolic messages that had all been a terrible roaring noise. But the silence that followed was worse. Her phone no longer rang. Friends she'd had for decades sent terse final texts, ashamed to be associated with her. Her termination letter was delivered by courier, cold and impersonal. She was professionally radioactive. No airline, no airport service company would even grant her an interview. She was forced to sell the house where she'd raised her children, packing 20 years of her life into cardboard boxes. Each framed photo, each piece of furniture felt like an artifact from a different life, one she had casually set on fire. In the end, there was no dramatic confrontation or final reckoning. Her life simply ended. She took the proceeds from her home and moved to a faceless apartment complex in a state she'd only ever flown over a ghost haunted by the memory of a little boy's cry and the sickening sound of tearing paper. The karma wasn't a lightning bolt from the heavens. It was the slow, crushing weight of her own actions. 2 weeks after that horrific day, Anya and Owen returned to Dulles International Airport. The atmosphere could not have been more different. As they entered the first-class check-in area, the agents straightened up their expressions professional, but laced with an unmistakable deference. There were no suspicious glances, no imperious demands. Their boarding passes were processed with a quiet efficiency that was profoundly respectful. David Chen, the supervisor, was waiting for them personally. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago, the stress of the incident having etched new lines around his eyes. "Dr. Sharma Owen," he said, his voice earnest. "I wanted to personally escort you to the gate and see you off. We have a private lounge waiting for you." He knelt to Owen's level. "And Owen, I spoke with Captain Miller. No relation," he added hastily, and he said the most important part of any flight crew is the co-pilot. He was wondering if you'd like to come see the cockpit before we take off." Owen, who had been clinging nervously to Anya's hand, let go. His eyes wide with wonder were the only answer needed. The real cockpit. With all the buttons. All the buttons, David confirmed with a gentle smile. At the gate, the new energy was palpable. The crew greeted them with genuine warmth. A flight attendant took Owen by the hand and led him down the jet bridge. "Come on, Captain Owen, your chariot awaits." Anya watched him go, her heart swelling. This was the beginning of the repair. This was how you overwrote a traumatic memory with a positive one. "What you did, it's already changed things here," David said quietly, standing beside Anya. The first wave of the new training modules went out yesterday. It's humbling. A lot of us didn't realize the little things we were doing, the assumptions we were making. "Thank you." "Change starts with awareness," Mr. Chen Anya said, her gaze fixed on the plane. "The rest is just work." A few minutes later, Owen came bounding back up the jet bridge, his face alight with a joy so pure it was dazzling. He was wearing a small pair of plastic pilot's wings pinned to his blazer. "Auntie Anya, I saw everything. The captain let me press a button that wasn't important, and he said I was a natural. This time, the flight was seamless. As the Dreamliner ascended into a sky of impossible blue, Owen was glued to the window, narrating the shrinking world below. Anya found herself watching not the clouds, but her nephew. She had fought for him, marshaled all her resources, her intellect, her power. She had done it as his aunt, driven by love and a fierce protective instinct. But she knew this fight was a microcosm of her life's work, a battle against the systems that crush the vulnerable, a stand for the simple, profound idea that every single person has a right to dignity. The descent into Geneva was smooth, the Swiss landscape unfolding below them like a pristine map. When the plane finally docked, Anya's heart began to beat a little faster. This was the final step. As they walked down the jet bridge, Anya holding Owen's hand, they saw her. Standing right at the threshold where the bridge met the terminal was Dr. Chloe Williams. She looked exhausted, her surgeon's scrubs looking like they hadn't been off in days, but her eyes were locked on them, shining with an intensity that transcended her fatigue. The moment Owen saw her, the world narrowed to two people. "Mommy." His voice was a raw, ecstatic cry that echoed in the enclosed space. "Owen," Chloe choked out, dropping to her knees, her arms outstretched. He let go of Anya's hand and ran his little legs pumping as fast as they could carry him. He launched himself into his mother's embrace, a collision of love and longing 6 months in the making. They clung to each other, Chloe burying her face in his hair, her body shaking with silent, heaving sobs of relief. It was a reunion so potent, so private, that other disembarking passengers instinctively gave them a wide berth, their faces softening at the raw, beautiful sight. Anya stood back, giving them their sacred space tears tracking silently down her own cheeks. This was the victory. Not the settlement, not the protocol, not the firing. This moment of pure, undiluted love. Later that week, the three of them sat by the crystalline shore of Lake Geneva. The trauma of the airport felt a world away, bleached by the bright sun and washed clean by the alpine air. Owen was a few yards away, trying to teach Bartholomew the giraffe how to skip stones. Chloe watched him, a peaceful smile on her face, though her eyes still held a shadow of the ordeal. "You know," she began, turning to Anya, "I've spent weeks being furious. I composed 1,000 letters in my head to that woman to the airline. I wanted her to suffer, and she has, I suppose. She has, Anya affirmed. But sitting here watching him, I almost feel a sliver of pity for her," Chloe confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "To be so full of bitterness, so starved for power that you have to steal it from a 7-year-old boy. Her life must be so small, so empty." Anya looked out at the vast expanse of water at the majestic jet d'eau, reaching for the heavens. It was, she said, her voice filled with a profound sadness and wisdom. The world is full of people living in small, locked rooms of their own making. They see a child's joy and mistake it for something they can take. They see a passport not as a promise of adventure but as a tool of control. She turned to her sister, her expression clear and certain. "But we can't let them win. We can't let their smallness define the world for our children. Our job is to show him the size of the world, not the size of its cages." As if on cue, Owen, with a determined grunt, found the perfect flat stone. He drew his arm back, mimicking the motions he'd seen others make, and flung it with all his might. The stone hit the water's surface and leaped a tiny, improbable miracle. It skipped once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, a full 7 times before finally surrendering to the deep, clear water. In its wake, a series of perfect, ever-expanding rings radiated outward, shimmering across the lake's surface, long after the stone that made them was gone. The story of Owen and Dr. Anya Sharma is a stark reminder that the biggest battles are often fought not on a battlefield, but in the everyday spaces where power is abused. It shows how one person's prejudice can cause immense pain, but also how one person's refusal to back down can trigger a tidal wave of change. The video of Karen Miller's actions shocked the world, but the real power was in the aftermath, in the demand for accountability that followed. It proves that we all have a role to play in standing against injustice, no matter how small it may seem at the moment. If this story moved you and you believe in the power of holding people and corporations accountable, please give this video a like to help it reach more people. Share it with your friends and family to spread the message that decency and justice must prevail. And please subscribe to our channel for more true stories of karma courage and the incredible moments when ordinary people do extraordinary things. Thank you for listening.